Today's message. We made it through one of the darkest days of the year, right? We made it through one of those. Made it through Halloween. I don't celebrate Halloween, so can't really tell you about what. I can tell you what I think of it, but can't really tell you about me participating, because I did not participate. So today the message is about shun evil. And shun evil comes up, well, not just shun evil itself, but turning from evil comes up quite often in the Bible. So I've got a few scriptures to make sure that we stay on track today. And then if I have enough time, hopefully this room doesn't get so hot that I can't stand it. First one that we'll kind of start off with, Proverbs 3:7. Don't be wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. So what do we do? What do we see? What do we see so often? And I'll kind of go back, tell a little bit of a story about myself, just in life in general. I'm pretty sure I've probably talked about this before. I'm 40-ish years old, and so I was young once. I thought I knew everything, and then I cracked open a Bible and realized I didn't know enough. I didn't know enough about life. I didn't know enough about what I was going to do moving forward. I didn't know enough about where I was going. And then here we go. It's like, I always put it as the example of when the Israelites wandered around the wilderness for 40 years. That was me. Obviously, I didn't wander around the wilderness, but I wandered around life. I was a kid in my teenage years, my 20s. I grew up in a Christian home, went to church. But when you see people that go to church and they are doing what everyone else is doing, it's a little confusing, right? And then you think, well, these people are talking about they're going to go to heaven, so if I can do the same things they're doing, why not I just do it too if I get to go to heaven? So that's what I was saying is when you open a Bible and you start reading it, it changes your perspective and starts giving you discernment of what's right and what's wrong. And some people never get it. I'll be honest. There's educators out there. There's pastors of churches that, they grew up maybe in Christian homes. They grew up learning the Bible, and it's a job for them, So it's something that, it is part of their life, but it is also a job. So how do you treat a job? It can be a little confusing, right? It can be, is it in your heart? Is it really what you truly want to do? And people have asked me that question. So I probably could have had some opportunities to join a church and be staff on a church. But something in me told me no. And I associated it as, it's God speaking to me and saying, hey, Andy, this is not what I want you to do, because every time we get a job doing something, you get kind of set in your ways, right? You get kind of set in you get kind of stuck, right? And then we get stagnant. And I didn't want to do that. As you grow up, you think, okay, I want to do this. And then you backtrack and you're like, hey, God, what is it that you really want me to do? And then he began to do a work in me, right? He was refining me. And we talk about refinement so many times in the Bible. They talk about things like olive oil. And olive oil, in that process of olive oil, back then they used to take, it was like a basket. If you can hear me, it's like a basket. In the basket, they would put the olives inside the olive basket, and then they would take these stones, and it would almost look like a yoke. You know what a yoke on an oxen looks like? And what they would do is they would keep adding more stones to it, and it would smash it. So it kind of looked like, do you remember those baskets that they held like cobras in? And it kind of looked like a vase, and it was made twined this way. And then they put it, and it allowed it to collapse. So it allowed it to collapse when it was pressed. So they had these presses. And the other way they did it was with, if they had an animal, like, say like a donkey. So if they had a donkey, or I guess they could have used an ox for this process, but you might have seen like a donkey, and it would have been on like a circular press, and then that would have pressed the olives into oil. But this basket was a pressing. So if you think of life, as that press, right? We get into these situations where life gets tough, right? Life gets too chaotic, but we duck and weave, and we move and navigate through it the best we can. But a lot of times, if we're not using the help from God to navigate that, that's when we could get into where we're going down the wrong fork in the road, right? So as I grew up and got a little bit older, especially after I had a child of my own, I began to refine a little more. And that refinement looked a little bit more like pruning. So that's another thing that they talk about quite often, is the pruning. And the pruning process encourages growth, right? New growth. But it also takes the old parts of us and throws it into the fire. So that analogy, or that parable, gets used quite often in the Bible. So as I got older, I started to take these little pieces of my life, and I would start to feel this feeling, and that feeling is